Hi, Misha here. It's been a little bit since I've done a series of black box videos. And because it is the holidays, and because of all the Star Wars stuff, and because of what a part it's been in my life, although I don't really talk about it much, I want to do this series, jokingly titled The Force Ghost of Christmas versus, past, present, and future. This is part one. The Force Ghost of Christmas Past, where I thought I would just talk about me and Star Wars and what it meant. I am kind of tail end of what you would call Generation X. I'm not quite a millennial, but I'm a little young to be a solid Xer. I was not alive when the original Star Wars came out in 1977, and really too young to see Empire and Return of the Jedi when they were in theaters, plus, the whole blind thing, so it wasn't like, and I did go to theaters quite a bit when I was a kid, but it wasn't, you know what I mean. I think you follow. I mean, luckily, the older movies, there was a lot more dialogue, a lot more exposition, so I was actually able to follow along pretty good. And, of course, that was always my excuse to buy the toys, and boy, howdy, did I. At least, I didn't have every one, not even close. I was a little kid when they were out, so I did play with them a lot, sometimes in the bathtub. But, by the way, A-Wings, when you fly them into the bathtub like it's Dagobah, the battery thing doesn't work anymore. Just personal story there. Also, the Imperial Lambda or Theta shuttle was an awesome playset. Screw putting Han Solo and Carbonite in Slave 1. I always put it in the Imperial shuttle and had the Emperor in there, and yeah, it's good stuff. I remember getting the Emperor figure. It was a mail away for whatever reason, so I collected the points and mailed it off. Also, remember my original Darth Vader figure. Did anyone else remember that the original Darth Vader seemed kind of like scrawny, like small? Like, I don't know, he just seemed out of proportion. I think it's because the character itself was so tall. They try to keep it same, the toy, the same basic height, so when they, as the other toys, so when they kind of scaled it, because he's tall, he ended up just coming out really skinny. Anyway, I digress. My dog at the time, it was a really good dog, decided to perform an Obi-Wan before we even knew that existed. And I couldn't find my Darth Vader one day and found it, and my dog had chewed off both of his legs quite neatly, right about the same place that Obi-Wan slashed Anakin's legs. So, hey, maybe my dog knew the future was going to happen 20 years later. What do you think? It's morning here, so I'm having coffee. It's December 19th when I'm recording this, so episode 9 as it's styled. The Rise of Skywalker is starting to make its way around now. It's already been shown a few places, and midnight premieres here and all that good jazz. But I'll talk about that more in the second episode. But yeah, so I had the toys. As a little kid, I was pretty obsessed with Star Wars, much more so than Star Trek. Then I got it more. It was straightforward, simple, like fewer characters. At that time, Star Trek had been off the air. The original series was still on, but I remember kind of putting it in the same pot in my mind as the Adam West Batman. They were both kind of on reruns at the same time, and both, things I watched, I enjoyed, but it was just there. The Next Generation came out, and I didn't really know what to think about it, but I'll do a video on that. But Star Wars I got when I was 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. And I liked Empire, but as a kid, Return of the Jedi was my favorite. Obviously, Ewoks didn't have a lot of impact on me. Blind. But I liked the Jabba's palace scene. I thought that was neat. The Rancor, I had the Rancor toy, I had the Jabba toy, all the little weird aliens, and just the whole atmosphere, and seeing Luke be a boss. Also, I've always, even to this day, loved the end of Return of the Jedi. At least the Death Star run part, and the especially Emperor's Throne Room part. I think the stuff on Endor is okay. And I get why they did the Han Solo, putting the bombs in part to give him something, but it did seem extraneous. I think that could have been fleshed out a little more. And the Ewoks part, kind of neutral on. I've never really felt one way or the other about it. I get the metaphor of these little forest dwellers killing stormtroopers being for Vietnam. People say it's ridiculous. The thing is, we don't know how many Ewoks are there. Could have been hundreds, thousands, stormtroopers. It wasn't their environment. And, of course, they were overly cocky. They let their guard down. And I'm sure a lot of people felt the same way about Vietnam. So I get it. Maybe it was just one of those things that was more relevant back then. Another film I liked as a kid was Rambo. So there's that. And Rocky, by the way. Coffee. So yeah, Return of the Jedi came out. I got all the toys I could. Back then, interestingly, there was really no way to get it on home media. So what we did, I guess the statute of limitations is that we did have HBO. My brother recorded it for me on HBO, on cassette tape, VHS, and I watched the living shit out of all three movies. So much so that was kind of the definitive edition for me, including the parts he had taped over, because you start the tape and it'd have the first couple of clips of what was recorded on before, and then it'd go into the movie, and every little jerk and jog and little malfunction, it was just part of my Star Wars thing. I remember watching them on Sunday afternoons, whatever. My family liked it. They weren't in love with it, but they liked it. I also remember asking my mother especially, what happened to Darth Vader? And, her thing was, he was in a wreck. He was in his plane crashed. Because back then, all we really knew about Anakin Skywalker was he was a pilot, he went to the dark side, and at some time in the past, he done got fucked up. The most we knew was that little scene of the back of his head from Empire, and then the face reveal scene in Jedi, and that was it. So we had to fill in a lot of blanks, and it was fun, but it wasn't really something we thought about. The Emperor was the Emperor. I know that they changed him. A lot changed between episode 4 and, I was going to say 1, but 4 and then 5, 6. But I get it. They didn't know when the Star Wars came out what it would become. But then when they made the sequels, they at least joined those two together. And they did a pretty good job of fitting them all together. The flow is good. And I think, So the movies are out. Luckily, I didn't know that such a thing as the holiday special existed for many more years. Thank God. I remember vaguely catching the cartoons, droids, and Ewoks, and just kind of being like, it was a thing. Maybe watched a couple episodes of each. Life moved on. I got older. I still like Star Wars. Really did, but kind of went dormant like a lot of people in the late 80s. I got older, still young, still pre-pubescent, but old enough where Star Trek started to appeal, plus Next Generation by 1988, 89 was starting to get pretty dang good. And there were 4 good movies, and then Star Trek 5 that came out in 89. Dear Lord, Star Trek 5. I thought it was a comedy, so I loved it at first. It was only later I realized it was supposed to be serious, and that's why everyone hated it. I just thought it was a joke, kind of like Star Trek 4 was. yeah, anyway. But yeah, so I kind of got into Star Trek a bit. Went to some conventions. That was cool. People were really cool to me there. Let me hold things. I got to meet some of the actors. They're really nice people. But then the news came out. My mother. It was a Saturday morning. The mail came in, and there was news. There was new Star Wars. Oh yes. They announced the Timothy Zahn trilogy, which we now think of as the Thrawn trilogy. And even though they were books, we were all excited because it was new Star Wars after 10 years. An official, at that time, canon Star Wars. This is before the prequels were announced. I mean, we knew back in the 80s that Lucas wanted to do prequels. Heck, there was even back then the rumor that he wanted to do 9 episodes. But Jedi was just so expensive, so exhausting. I don't blame him for moving on. Plus, he went on to make Indiana Jones stuff. And I did like Indiana Jones 3. I know a lot of people lampoon it, but yeah, I liked it. I mean, you know, Temple of Doom's probably the best, but I digress. So that was cool. And that kind of started a slow burn renaissance in the early 90s. And of course, a lot of computer games were coming out then. And there had been Star Wars games in the 80s, but, you know, you started to have actually good, fun games like X-Wing and TIE Fighter. Now, what I did back in the day, I couldn't really play games, but what I could do was edit games. So I would create missions for my friends. You know, I'd learn the editor and place squadrons and goals, and I never really did that much with X-Wing, but I did with TIE Fighter, so that's how I participated. And I always enjoyed, I had a friend that was a real-life pilot at the time he was training. He got his license and everything. And so he would fly TIE Fighter, and I would try to you know, screw him up, you know, just because he was a really good player at the game. And it was always great. I'd had kind of a computer room I'd work in, and then he would be in my room on a different computer, because that was back when you'd bring your computers over and have like LAN parties. So I'd be putting stuff on floppy disks, 3.5 inch, and putting the new missions, and he'd take it in there. And if I got an exclamation out of him of something like, "Oh my God," or "I can't believe you did that," or "Holy fuck," then I knew I did my job well. There were plenty of other games popping up then. Rebel Assault was on console. Again, a slow burn renaissance. Then the Micro Machines toys came out. And I was just young enough to still be interested then. But the coolest one was, to me at the time, by accident, what was called the Action Fleet, which were almost 1/72 scale, at least for the fighter models. They had removable pilot figures, and yeah, they were toys, but they were pretty well detailed, and I really got one by mistake. I grew up in a small town. We didn't have much of anything, but there's a near town by called Fort Smith where there was a lot of shopping. And one day I had asked my mother to look for something in the Micro Machines or whatever, and she came back with this bigger box. I'm like, well, what's this? You know, she picked up the wrong thing. Turns out it was Darth Vader's TIE Advanced from the Action Fleet. And that's when I quit caring about the little Micro Machines, when you can get these actually big and interesting near models. And of course, I wasn't really a good model builder back then, so it was pretty cool. So I kind of got into those for a bit, which I'll talk about as I go on. There's actually a funny story towards the end of the 90s with that too. But, so I collected those. Of course, read the Timothy Zahn books. Shadows of the Empire came out for the Nintendo 64. That was a big deal. So that kind of got things going. Right before it, you had the THX remastered Trilogy get released finally on VHS, so we all bought those. And that was cool, and that was still pre-special edition. They just cleaned stuff up a bit, little better transfer. Of course, by today's standards, it's still VHS. But, yeah, so that got a lot of interest, being able to do home video, and this was all a lead up. In 97, they did the special editions of the original trilogy, and they released these in theaters. For those who were too young then, or just didn't care, you don't get it. It was an event. For those of us that had just missed out on seeing these in the theaters as little kids, now we were teenagers, able to drive, able to go. So we are, organized kind of road trips together. Not very far, but I remember we would get a group of, anywhere from 12 to 16 of us kids from school. And we went to all 3 of the re-releases. And when we went to the A New Hope, as it was later kind of retitled, the theater actually had 2 actors in costumes as Obi-Wan and Darth Vader come out with the little toy light-up lightsabers and fake lightsaber fight in the theater. Not in the auditorium, but actually in the theater before the movie came on. And it was cool. They made it an event. They, made it a little special, and it was a shared experience. Of course, we all knew the movies, so it wasn't like everyone had to be quiet, and everyone could talk and, talk about their favorite parts and look for the new parts. And, of course, no one really worried about spoilers. I never even heard the word spoilers back in the 90s, but even if so, it's just Star Wars. If you needed spoilers, you needed help. Funnily enough, I remember we went to Empire. Of course, enjoyed it. Don't have a lot of specific memories, although there was this one girl that I was crushing on pretty hard then that was in the theater with us then, and I was just really excited she was with us. Anyway. But Jedi, what I remember about it, of course, it was the 3rd one. Again, the same group goes. And we had this friend. Stayed our friend, all the way through high school and into college and beyond college. And he was, basically, let's put it like this. Chris Farley was his idol back then. He was like our Chris Farley, including the Below later on. But I digress. He was a portly but not obese, rotund guy. Gay, and just a life of the party type guy. So we're in the theaters, and the scene comes up where it's Vader and the Emperor in the throne room in Jedi alone, and Vader is telling the Emperor about the rebels, and Vader tells the Emperor that his son Skywalker is with them, and the Emperor says, "Are you sure?" And Vader says, "I have felt him." And David, top of his lungs, goes, "Gross, he's your son!" Biggest laugh in the whole goddamn theater. Best thing ever. He had a few other good quips in that movie, but that was just 20 years plus later. Just perfect. Just perfect. Just made the whole thing great. And then, of course, the special editions were a prequel to the prequels. It was Lucas trying things out, getting us to... And, of course, they announced the prequels were coming. And, they came out in May. The Phantom Menace, May of 99. So, University was out. And we all got tickets. I remember me and another friend who didn't have class actually went and stood in line all that day and got tickets for everyone. Still more or less the same group. Maybe a little smaller now. Maybe more like 8 or 10 people. But still the same group of people. And, so we went and saw The Phantom Menace. I can do videos talking about the prequels. I think all of us with Phantom Menace were a little... Yeah, but we also knew it was only the first of 3, so we were hopeful. And we just kind of let it go. I think everyone found Kid Anakin not only annoying, but kind of pointless. I don't remember a whole lot of Jar Jar hate, but no love either. But then again, by this point, we're young adults. So, but of course, the leads we all liked. Hey, it's more Yoda. Hey, Darth Maul. Yeah, it's a thing. Again, I can do a video on that. Now, when Attack of the Clones came out, I didn't actually see that one in the theater. It's the one of the original Star Wars that I didn't see, the only one. I wasn't in a good place in my life, plus I guess I was still an undergrad, maybe I was getting into grad school. I remember I was really busy. Okay, I'll just be honest, I pirated the damn thing when it came out, and just watched it on my computer in my townhouse. I just didn't have time, or maybe anyone to go with. I remember what it was. I had just gone through a breakup with a girl I'd been living with for a couple of years. We broke up in August, September. That came out. It wasn't a good time. That year was kind of crap. It got better after we broke up, finally enough. You know how breakups are. They're a miserable thing. You don't realize getting into it. But, yeah, so yeah. But, yeah, Attack of the Clones was like, okay. I mean, we already had a kind of a bad feeling about this because of the title. We thought the title was a joke. I mean, we always just used to say, why not the Clone Wars is a title? But, yeah. For Revenge of the Sith, kind of back to form, I was out of college at that point, and went and saw it with my family. And that was fun. It was a nighttime showing. It was pretty easy to get. I think it was opening night for the one, but I think it was like the opening weekend, maybe like that Saturday or something. But I went with my family. That was cool. And, you know, it was definitely the best of the prequels. Certainly everyone enjoyed it in my circle the most. And I wanted to mention this before kind of concluding, is enjoyment. That friend I was telling you about who was really good at TIE Fighter, the game, we used to have debates. You ever see Clerks? That was a great movie. But we'd have debates like that. And we'd debate about the best Star Wars, like they would in Clerks, before even Clerks came out. And this is between Jedi and Empire. And he said something about, we were talking about George Lucas's directing and how he was a great idea guy and even kind of like story crafter guy, but not a great dialogue guy. Even back then, yeah, everyone knew that, even pre-prequels. And we're talking about the movies, and we were saying, well, you know, look, he had more control over A New Hope, and then my friend said, yeah, the one he had the most control over, and we all know it wasn't the best one no matter what, because again, we're debating Empire versus Jedi. We're like, yeah, haha, you know, yeah, we all like New Hope, but we're like, yeah, of the three, it's the weakest. And that was something shared by our group at that time. That was kind of considered the weakest. It was more of the campy, fun film. Everyone was more in the, hey, is it Jedi or Empire? I mean, it seems like Empire is consistently better than Jedi. But when Jedi hits its highs, it really hits its highs. And then it has a few meh points, kind of filler. Whereas Empire is more consistent. That's kind of what we came to. But a lot of late night debates. First when we were younger, probably caffeine and Dorito fueled. As we got older, probably, well, you know, as young teenagers, Mike's Hard Lemonade fueled. And then later on, Heaven Hill Vodka. Oh, God. Fueled, and then finally in college, actually good wine and whatnot fueled. But it went on, because it was a thing. Everyone had an opinion, be they a casual Star Wars fan or a big one. And that included all the girls, the women in our group. They all had something to say about it. Heck, even most of the parents had something to say about it, to one extent. And that's why it was a cultural thing back then. It was a touchstone. Even if you didn't like it, you knew it. It was a common topic. And that's something we don't have a lot of today because of how much media we have today. Back then, there were fewer movies, far fewer TV shows coming out. So whenever there was an event like that, it really mattered. To end this, I'll tell you that Beewing Story. Yeah, the action fleet. I had a lot of fun collecting them. I've always been a collector type. You see my model collection, you see my gun collection. Even as a teenager and young adult, I was still going, but they were starting to wind down the action fleet in the late 90s. And one of the last ones, the series they came out with, had some pretty weird, obscure things in it that I did pick up, like, for example, the Star Viper from Shadows of the Empire. Now, I never got every single one of the action fleets. For example, I never got the TIE Defender from the video game, or the E-Wing, which was from the books. But I wanted to get all the as seen on screen fighters. And one of the last ones they came out with was the Beewing. So same friend who was a TIE fighter, good player, and made that comment. We're just sitting around one day bored, probably 19. He's like, we're just talking, and it's like, hey, do you want to drive to Toys R Us and see if they have a B-Wing? Now, keep in mind, Toys R Us was not in our town. It was 45 minutes, no traffic, hour drive with traffic away. But it's the 90s. It's pre-cell phones. So we drove roughly 2 hours round trip to go to Toys R Us to see if they had a B-Wing. And they did, and I bought it. And that was probably the last Star Wars toy I bought. Probably the last toy I ever bought. So it kind of bookends my childhood. I still have that B-Wing, by the way. Still have all the action fleet. Never got rid of them. They're boxed up and have been for 20 years, but still have them. I did read some of the now expanded universe Legends books because they were available on cassette, and there's a nice woman in my hometown that ran a bookstore that would try to get them for me. She was a big sci-fi fan. She liked Star Trek a lot and helped me get into it, but she would always, if they had a new Star Trek or Star Wars book come out on cassette tape, she would A, get it for me, and B, give me a really good price, because back then they were really expensive. It wasn't like today where you could put them on a CD or just download them. I mean, cassette tapes were expensive. So I did read some of those. Some are good, some are mediocre, some were terrible. And what was nice about the expanded universe, you could just kind of pick your canon. If you liked a series like the Thrawn, hey, that's the truth. If you didn't, you just kind of ignore it. It was soft canon. No one really cared back then. I mean, we had fun with it, but even the prequels, even when they sucked, I don't remember anyone actually getting truly outraged. It was like, oh, Lord, George, you're at it again. Whatever you're on, I'll have some too, type thing. But he was such a likable guy, and you could tell that he liked his craft, and he was having fun, and that was infectious. So, I don't know. It was a thing. And then, of course, after 2005, Star Wars would not quite go dormant again. You would end up with the Clone Wars movie and then the Clone Wars TV show, which is cool. But, you know, it was kind of a slow burn, just kind of keeping things going. And I remember that Lucas was on a late-night talk show interview. I don't know, Conan or might have been... I don't know. I doubt it might have been Jay Leno, but I didn't watch Leno much. I was more of a David Letterman fan. Anyway, he was saying that Red Tails was his new movie then, and he's talking about it, and they asked him, well, what about episode 7? Is that ever going to happen? And he said, nope, Red Tails is as close as you're going to get. And then he kind of paused and said, at least for me. He goes, yeah, maybe one day I'll sell it. And he goes, maybe someone else can do it if they want, but I'm pretty much done. And to his credit, that's exactly what he would do many years later. So yeah, Star Wars has always been around in my life. Always been a casual, happy fan about it. When I liked it, I liked it. When I didn't, I just shrugged and moved along. So it definitely means something to me, because I'm kind of right in that target demographic, right in between the original trilogy and the prequels. I was a young kid when the original trilogy was a thing, and I was a young adult when the prequels were a thing. So yeah, that's my Force Ghost of Christmas past on Star Wars. Much more of a walk down memory lane. And yeah, I'll make another part to this, and we'll get it put up. Appreciate you staying with me. Black box video. If you could, like, share, and subscribe, and also check out some of my other videos. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon next time.